Approaching abjection. There looms within abjection, one of those violent, dark revolts of being, directed against a threat that seems to emanate from an exorbitant outside or inside, ejected beyond the scope of the possible, the tolerable, the assimilable. It beseeches, worries, and fascinates desire, which nevertheless does not let itself be seduced. Apprehensive, desire turns aside. Sickened, it rejects. A certainty protects it from the shameful. A certainty of which it is proud holds on to it. But simultaneously, just the same, that impetus, that spasm, that leap is drawn toward an elsewhere as tempting as it is condemned. Unflagging, like an inescapable boomerang, a vortex of summons and repulsion places the one haunted by abjection literally beside himself. So here what I think in extraordinarily poetic language, and I hope that you can appreciate the poetry of Kristeva's work. It's one of the things that I think marks her as somewhat different than some of the other French theorists, in that her work is vivid, somewhat metaphorical, and, well, very metaphorical at times, but it's purposefully poetic. You know, it's not purposefully obtuse. It's purposefully visceral, I would say. So I think what she's saying here is that the idea of the abject it's the beginning of sort of setting up her main idea, which is in psychoanalysis, as in semiotics, and we discussed this with Derrida, there is one of the fundamental core dualities is self and other, or subject and object. So the latter in terms of semiotics and language. And that as many times as I think this is the meat of it, and I'm not sure that I was able to express it in class, that there's an oppositional nature to it. And many people have said, obviously, it's more complicated than that. And obviously, it's more, there's multiplicities of meanings. Obviously. I mean, we all know that. Anyone who studied poetry in high school or has ever looked at a poem understands that. But the important thing is, I think, as I was trying to get across with Derrida, is this trying to pin down meaning, these attempts to pin down meaning, and to see those moments of pinning down meaning for what they are, to whatever they may be. They could be a lot of different things. And here what I think Kristeva is saying, or what she's setting herself up to say, is that it's almost like for C.P. Snow, science and culture, it's almost as if, we're kind of talking about a third culture, and it's almost as if that's sort of what Kristeva is saying about the ego or the self and the other, is that there is this whole other realm, this whole other thing called the abject. And what the abject is in psychoanalytic terms, it's what we reject as a part of ourselves, what we're ashamed of, what is ugly about us. But psychologically, psychically. But also, as she goes on to describe, and I think the vivid detail is compelling, quite literally, about the abject as a visceral experience, there's the physicality of the abject. And so in doing this, by sort of talking about the abject in a physical way, which she goes on to do, she doesn't necessarily talk about it right in this passage, but in talking about it in this way, it draws our attention to one of the things I've been referring to, one of the things I refer to throughout the residency, which is the place of language in vis-a-vis the relationship between language and experience. And this idea that as soon as we enter into language, there's a mediation that happens. And I think what Kristeva is calling our attention to is that there are these parts, pre-verbal, extraverbal, non-verbal experiences. And she goes on to say on the next page, she's talking about corpses, and she says, the corpse is a cesspool and death. It upsets even more violently the one who confronts it as a fragile and fallacious chance. A wound with blood and pus, or the sickly acrid smell of sweat, of decay, does not signify death. Okay? In the presence of signified death, right, a flat encephalograph, for instance, I would understand, react, or accept. So here she's saying, if we can kind of distance ourselves from that actual visceral experience, the flat encephalograph, whatever, what have you, catatonic state, I guess, seeing someone like that, I don't know. There's a distancing, right? Whereas the corpse, right? She says, no, as in true theater, without makeup or masks, true theater, without makeup or masks, refuse and corpses show me what I permanently thrust aside in order to live. So it's this, there's this quality, and again, think of it as poetic and somewhat metaphoric, but the core idea of what she's suggesting is, I think, the way in which lived experience unmediated by language, is a confrontation that enables us to, well, it terrifies us. That's what she talks about in the beginning, right? Anxiety and this dread, sickened, rejecting, tolerable, the thinkable. It lies there quite close but cannot be assimilated. It beseeches, it worries, it fascinates desire, our desire for meaning, for wholeness, for making it all coherent, for making it all make sense, right? And the abject is the thing that makes us anxious, because that solidity is beyond our grasp. It is unassimilable, as she says. She actually refers to, in these visceral terms, the spasm, the leap. And then to go on to the next section on page 3 with the corpse, it's the lived life. It's the ugliness of lived life, or not even just the ugliness, the abject. And the reason why the corpse is so abject is because it's the thing that threatens life itself, right? Or the thing that shows us, reveals, she uses that word very specifically, shows us the border between life and death, the border between what we can conceive and what we cannot conceive of. Because none of us know what happens after death. I mean, we have faith and we have beliefs and we have thoughts, but we cannot know that experience. That's sort of the ultimate boundary, I think, is what Kristeva is saying. And that's the ultimate thing that we cannot know. And so that challenges very fundamentally our desire for coherence and meaning and relationality and structure. It's and again, the idea of death is something we can manage. The flat encephalograph, I mean, it's difficult, but we can manage it. It still distances us. But face to face with a corpse, we can't distance ourselves from it.